This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the X-Cast X-Files Podwatch, and this is episode 25 on our whistle-stop tour of the X-Files as we wait for season 11. And today we're covering the episodes Our Town and Anasazi. I'm your host today, Carl Sweeney, and I'm joined once again by esteemed writer Keith R.A. DeCandido. Hello again, Keith.
Hiya, Carl. How's it going?
It's going very well, thank you. Now then, Keith, you've talked to me in the past about your X-Files story, but I was wondering about what you're currently working on. So what can you tell me about that?
I've got a bunch of things actually that are out in 2017. It's a busy year for me, including two projects that I'm doing with Jonathan Mayberry, who is the editor of the X-Files anthologies for IDW. The first is a collaboration between Jonathan and George Romero, who have collaborated on a Night of the Living Dead anthology, which ties into the 1968 zombie film. And basically, Jonathan and George hired a bunch of us, including me, to do short stories that take place in the 48 hours of the movie itself. My particular story is called Live and on the Scene, and it's about one of the TV reporters and what he has to deal with when the zombie outbreak happens. And I had a lot of fun with it. There's a bunch of really strong stories in there by a bunch of different really, really good horror writers. Mira Grant, which is a pen name for Shauna McGuire, is in it. Brian Keene, Joe Lansdale, and a bunch of others, which I'm forgetting off the top of my head. It's called Knights of the Living Dead. It's edited by George Romero and Jonathan Mayberry. That was a lot of fun. Also with Jonathan, I did a short story. Jonathan has written a series of supernatural-ish thrillers called the Joe Ledger series. Joe Ledger. He's opened Joe Ledger up to other writers to write stories set in that particular milieu, and I did a story for that, which is called Ganbate, which is a Japanese word that means do your best, and it focuses on one of the other members of Ledger's team, Warbride, Lydia Ruiz, and it gives her backstory. Bunch of really cool people have stories in there as well. That's out in October. It's called Joe Ledger Unstoppable. And I've also got an Orphan Black book coming out just in time for the series to end. It's a reference book called Classified Clone Report, which was done in cooperation with producers of the show, and it's a reference book to the series. I'm working on the next books in my two fantasy series, my Precinct series, which is fantasy police procedurals, and also a first book in a new urban fantasy series. It's going to come out from Wordfire Press, as well as I also have the latest in my Marvel Comics trilogy, the Tales of Asgard trilogy featuring the Warriors 3 is out, and there's going to be an omnibus of all three books which feature Thor and Sif and the Warriors 3. So that's some of what I've got coming out this year.
Great stuff. So, listeners, if you've come to Keith's work through the X-Files story he wrote, I'm sure there's something in the things he's talked about there that will appeal to you. Yeah, the Night of the Living Dead one, that sounds particularly intriguing to me. There is a rumour that George Romero almost got involved with doing an X-Files episode around about season 7, but sadly it never came to be. Now then, let's get on to talk about these two episodes today then. So we're in May 1995 for both of these, and the first one is Our Town. It's the penultimate episode of season 2, written by Frank Spotnitz, directed by Rob Bowman, and this is the episode set in Dudley, Arkansas, that involves a missing government inspector, and we later find out that this town is rife with cannibalism. The Chaco chicken plant is the key setting in this episode in many ways. So what do you think about this episode, Keith?
It's interesting. The X-Files short story that I wrote for the Trust No One anthology actually takes place between these two episodes.
Yes, yeah.
I mostly I chose that because I wanted to set it in the second season as late as possible in the second season, so I kind of had to. But I also, when I was going through the stories, I realized that this is a rare case where Scully and Mulder actually close a big case. So often their cases wind up, unsolved with no arrests, or the person goes missing, or there's no evidence, and so they can't do anything. This is a case where they actually stopped a major serial killing ring, basically. The death count in Dudley, Arkansas is huge. They dredged up a ton of bones, and this is the sort of thing that, in the real world, federal agents make their careers on is this kind of case. And what's hysterical is that, of course, it's viewed throughout, because of the ongoing story arc, as a nothing case that they sort of fobbed off on these two to keep them busy. And it was just funny watching it. It's like, wow, this is like they actually closed a major case. It wasn't expected to be. It was just a missing persons to start out. So that I always liked, the fact that they actually, stopped something horrible from happening to a degree that they don't always get to do, And what I especially liked about this also, I liked it when, yes, there are some vaguely, there's the whole thing about cannibalism prolonging your life, which makes it an X-File, but even, it's still something that could happen, Even if the cannibalism didn't actually prolong their life, you could still take that element out of it, and it doesn't really change the story very much.
Yeah.
It's still about this horrible thing that these people are doing. Take out the slow aging aspect, and this could be a Criminal Minds episode.
Yeah, yeah. And you've got this sense of a community sort of destroying itself by welcoming in the outside world, and that's just quintessential X-Files, isn't it? You see that again and again in episodes from Home to Arcadia. It's something that the series did many, many times.
Yeah. I believe this was Frank Spotnitz's first credit, or at least his first solo writing credit on the show.
Yeah, it's his first standalone. He'd written Endgame before this, and this is his first Monster of the Week, as it were.
Yeah, okay, that was it. And it's interesting. I having the chicken factory there and showing us the feed that Paulie fell into and whatnot. I like the misdirect of that, because you really are primed to expect it to be a Soylent Green thing.
Yes.
And it is and it isn't. It's like, the chicken factory is a legitimate chicken plant. It's not, that's all as it should be. That's all above board. It's just, oh yeah, we also kill people and eat them.
Yeah, and you've got this sort of equivalence drawn between human behaviour and animal behaviour in certain ways. Mm-hmm. You've got it. It's remarked on that chickens eat chickens, but then as it turns out that people in Dudley eat other people from Dudley.
For that matter, you've got the more misdirects with the Indian mask, and also with the big round perfect fire, which of course is just the bonfire that they set.
Yeah, it's one of those episodes that you get from time to time where you get the figure of the Western elder man normally, who has been somewhere, and he's come back and he's appropriated their cultural traditions. He spent some time with the Jale tribe, I think is what they say.
Yeah.
And he's brought back their customs to this community and he's imported them. I'm not quite as fond of this aspect of the episode, which is that Scully ends up being disarmed and captured at the end.
Yeah.
It's kind of once too often, really, in the second season. It's only for a short time. It doesn't really impact on the audience very much. She gets assaulted off screen.
And Mulder miraculously shows up at the last second before she's about to get her head cut off. Yeah. And only because she happened to be driving down the road and sees the fire. Yeah. I didn't like. There was a good excuse for her being kidnapped early in the season because they had to write her out because she was pregnant, but that was a crutch they really shouldn't have continued to lean on.
Yeah, when you've had Dwayne Barry and Donnie Faster, anything that comes after that has got to really be good to compete with that.
Yeah, and this didn't. And it wasn't necessary. There are other ways they could have done that without the artificial suspense of, it's not like we don't know that Scully is going to be saved. And there was really, it didn't add anything to the story that the story really needed. Just, like I said, artificial suspense and then an unconvincing rescue that just, it was a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, I agree. And I've already covered this episode on the Xcast when I talked to Amy Walker about this, and I said much the same. But having said that, there's quite a lot to sink your teeth into in other aspects. It's quite a good episode. Some people think it's a great episode. I don't.
It's a good Monster of the Week episode. Like I said, I appreciate the fact that they actually, close a case and arrest people, which is something they don't. In fact, there was even a comment on it that I had forgotten that Mulder had made. In the previous episode I was on, we talked about Fire and Beyond the Sea, and at the beginning of Fire, Mulder and Scully have just testified in court. Which we don't actually see.
Oh, yeah,
but Mulder comments about how, that's the thing. We don't actually get to do that very often. Yeah, because you don't actually close any damn cases. I made a joke about that in, well, not a joke, but in my short story, Back in El Paso, My Life Worthless. The point of view character in that story is an FBI, a regular, ordinary federal agent who's teamed up with Mulder and Scully. And his feeling is that they keep the X-Files around for the crappy cases that they can't close, because it's a separate unit, so their statistics are counted separately. And for that reason, they get all the crummy cases that can never get closed, and that's why they keep them open That's why they keep the X-Files open, so they're all the hard-to-close cases will be counted as a separate units case, and so it won't screw up the statistics for everybody else. Which is pretty much how law enforcement works in modern times anyway, so...
Yeah, I really like that aspect of your story, because there's a funny exchange where Colt lists all these cases that they haven't closed, but Scully says, well, hang on, you forgot about this and this and this. And... Yeah, well, in terms of the X-Files canon, your story is next then, because like you say, it takes place between Our Town and Anasazi. Yeah, again, listeners, if you haven't read it, go out and find it. It's well worth your time.
It's the first of the 3 IDW X-Files anthologies, trust no one.
But after that comes the second season finale, which is Anasazi.
The first of the 3-part...
Yeah.
I refer to it as the 3-part Navajo arc. It isn't really, but, the 3-part story that ramps up the There Are Aliens Among Us storyline.
Yeah, Anasazi kicks off the trilogy that also includes The Blessing Way and Paperclip, and it had a story by Chris Carter and David Duchovny, actually. Carter wrote the teleplay, and the episode was directed by R.W. Goodwin.
Yes, and Carter also appears in the episode briefly.
He does, very briefly. He's the FBI agent who Scully has to sort of explain herself to.
Oh, one of them. There's a whole hassle of them in there, grilling her because Mulder... Well, I mean, the story is basically that people are the conspiracy is closing in on Mulder to basically discredit him by drugging the water in his building so that he will be psychotic, which causes him to, among other things, haul off and belt Skinner, which is not the sort of thing that you're allowed to do when you're a federal agent, is hit your supervisor. And so there's a disciplinary hearing, and Scully is called in to talk to Skinner and a bunch of other high-ranking FBI people, one of whom is played by an uncredited Chris Carter, which I'm sure he enjoyed doing. And what's especially fascinating, I mean, Scully makes a comment about it later about how they weren't exactly being subtle. The drugging doesn't just affect Mulder. One of his neighbors winds up shooting her husband.
Yes.
Because she's drinking the same drugged water that he is. That's pretty appalling collateral damage. And then we also get to see Mulder's father and find out that he and the cigarette smoking man were involved in a project. And I especially like at the very beginning when the hacker, the fourth lone gunman, as it were, the thinker, manages to hack the MJ files, whatever those are, because we don't actually find out the specifics of what MJ stands for in this episode. But it's the Department of Defense's files on extraterrestrials. And when he gets it, we immediately see a conversation among 3 diplomats, 1 Italian, 1 Japanese, and 1 German. Yeah. And right there, immediately, okay, this is something that goes back to World War II and involves the Axis powers. It's beautifully done. It's a nice, subtle way of making it clear that it's something that specifically relates to that time period. And then also later tying it into Navajo code talking, where the files are encrypted by being translated into Navajo. And that wonderful comment that the cigarette smoking man makes to Mulder's dad, which is, who imagined, how could we possibly have predicted that, the computers that we only dreamed about would become home appliances? Which, of course, in the 40s and 50s, computers were these Jagunda things that took up an entire room. Yeah. And they had less processing power than the tablet I'm currently holding in my hand. Yeah. The idea of the march of technology forcing secrets to be revealed is one that was particularly strong in the 90s when the internet started becoming a thing, and makes it very timely in that regard. Yeah, it's so brilliantly done, and the whole thing about modes of communication runs all the way through this trilogy. Yes. All the way up to the Smoking Man and Albert Hostein's. They have a bit of a face-off with Skinner in Paperclip. Which is my absolute favorite scene in the entire 10-year history of the show is the this is where you pucker up and kiss my ass scene, which of course we're not talking about, that's for somebody else to talk about tomorrow. But I absolutely adore that scene. It was like, that was the scene that cemented Skinner as an absolutely magnificent character. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's because of that scene in particular that I became a Mitch Pileggi fan, to the point where it's like, if he's in it, that's enough reason for me to watch it, It was beautiful, but that wasn't in this episode. But I liked the use of Navajo code talking in the trilogy generally, and how it was used here, with Scully going to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and then tracking down Albert. That was that, like you said, modes of communication are very important. Cell phones are important still in this story as well.
Yeah.
It's how, the smoking man catches up to Mulder and the talking to each other and finding things out, and of secrets, and the line that is repeated, referring to the Anasazi tribe and referring to Mulder himself, which is that nothing vanishes without a trace. That's what criminology is about, is in a lot of ways, and it's also what Mulder, what Mulder keeps chasing, is that there is evidence that there's more going on than people are talking about, and there's a trace of it if he can just find it.
Yeah, so like I said, modes of communication, but also modes of storing information is very important.
Yes.
Yeah, Tony and Darren Mooney on the X-Cast did a 2-hour-long deconstruction of Anasazi, and they could have gone on for another 2 hours. It's such a texturally dense episode. There's so much going on. But one thing we should probably talk about is the Mulder-Scully relationship here, because you've got Scully acting as this kind of tether that's keeping Mulder just about on the right side of things, but only just.
Yeah, well, in his defense, he's drugged.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, she is the one who, is trying to clear his name. She's the one who takes his gun to ballistics to clear him. She's also the one who shoots him in the shoulder.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because if he shoots Krychek with the same gun that killed his father, then that'll be all they'll need to prove that he killed his father. And, man, that must have been a great payday for Nicholas Lee. Yes, he'll get guest star billing for basically getting thrown around by David Duchovny for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That was really all he did in the episode. And, of course, it gave us that wonderful line, "It's a good thing for you, she's a good shot." Or a bad one. Yeah. And just that little smile on her face as they tease her. But, yeah, Scully is the one, she lies on his behalf because now at this point she knows that there's something going on. We saw it even in Our Town, at the very beginning of Our Town, where she bitches about being given a crap assignment because they're trying to marginalize them, because they're getting too close to something important. And for that matter, she's the one who recognizes the Navajo. At first, Mulder assumes that the files are gibberish and a plant, just to make him look like an idiot. And she's the one who actually is the key to it, because she recognizes the code talking for what her father told. So she plays a very critical role in all of this. Mulder would never have gotten past, staring at the encrypted files if it wasn't for her. And he actually gets closer than he's ever gotten.
Yeah.
To exposing what's going on, and it's because of her, who ironically, as we're reminded in the episode, she was brought in to debunk the X-Files, and here she is actually improving their chances of actually doing what Mulder wants to do.
There's so much more we could say about this episode, but we're out of time, so I'll just note that it ends obviously on a great cliffhanger, which is Mulder in the boxcar, as it's, the smoking man says, "Burn it," and the boxcar
and after the soldier said that he's not in the boxcar, so where the heck did he go? Don't know what's going on. And then they burn it, and it's on fire, and then we fade to black and to be continued. Yes.
Indeed, and it'll be continued tomorrow on the X-Cast Podwatch with The Blessing Way and Paperclip.
Yes.
My thanks to you again, Keith. Listeners, if you want to find us on Twitter, we're at the X_cast. We're posting any news about the new series we can find. We're on Facebook doing the same thing too. So if you find our group, which is at the X-Files Basement, the X-Cast Podcast fan group, and we'd love as many of you as possible to come and join us there. My thanks once again to Keith R.A. DeCandido. Until next time, listeners, trust no one.